Welcome to Group Chat. I am Justin Verrier, and joining me, Rob Mahoney, Big Woz. I think I was served a Bronny James corner three highlight yesterday, which means it is officially this summer in the NBA. Rob, have you been breaking down those breakaway dunks, comparing them to old LeBron tapes?
I did see the breakaway dunk. Congratulations to Bronny James on his breakaway dunk. It was maybe a little overhyped based on the captioning. I'm going to say that. A little too much sizzle on that particular steak. But I support him in all of his future endeavors.
The caption I saw, and I don't remember who put it up there, it said, "Year 2 Bronny has begun."
There's a problem.
Made a breakaway dunk. It's like...
In Summer League.
Yeah.
In the California Classic. Not even real Summer League. Off-brand Summer League.
Well, Rob, you're not a Summer League guy.
I'm not?
Or at the very least, a tepid Summer League guy.
Sure.
Like, when you're not grinding the tape with the true, like, sickos out there watching the Utah Summer League.
I only watch Summer League basketball in person. It's the kind of experience that has to be felt to be believed. If you're out here watching, and look, I'm going to admit this. I did see some Topic highlights that nearly pulled me in, that nearly got me on board as far as watching the televised Summer League experience. But otherwise, it's so easy to over-index on this stuff. It's so easy to buy in on like one exciting performance on one random day in July. And that's just not what we're here for. You know, we're here for prospect hunting. We're here for information gathering. I want to do it boots on the ground style, Justin.
I enjoy the texts that I get from my civilian buddies every summer. At least 2 or 3 people will text me like, "Is this as bad as it looks on TV?" And I'm like, yes, it's actually worse.
Yakashunis really has to step it up after all those turnovers in 2 games. Yeah, it's definitely a mirage, although I think when a player does well enough in that setting, it foretells something. So you really just have to know how to look through all the noise to find like the indicators. And you're right, it's much tougher to do from afar than you are like smelling the Summer League atmosphere and really seeing what's going on there. But I'm not going this year. Rob, I don't think you're going this year as well.
I actually am. And Woz, you're going to be out there as well?
Yes, sir.
See, this thing, until you sweat in that Vegas heat, you don't really know if these prospects are any good yet or not. So Woz and I are going to find out firsthand, I think.
Okay. Well, good luck to you guys. I will be in the moderate temperature in the 70 degrees in my garden. So that's fine.
Well, also sweating it out, though, doing the real work.
Yeah, doing manual labor.
All right. Well, we're going to get into some of the best and worst moves of the offseason. Thus far, still a little bit out there going on, including this trade that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. So a 3-team deal involving the Heat, Clippers, and Jazz. The Heat get Norm Powell from the Clippers. The Clippers get John Collins from the Jazz, and then the Jazz reap Kevin Love, who's already tweeting his way through the trade reaction, Kyle Anderson, slow-mo, and a 2027 second-round pick. Rob, where do you want to start here? You want to start with Norm Powell going to the Heat?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that this is all it took to get Norm Powell. Like his contract situation, not exactly a long-term arrangement right now, so you're getting a bit of a rental, but Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love's contract, and they're not even the team to give up the second-round pick in the deal. Like, I think it's a pretty sweet situation for Miami, who, as we talked about last week, is just in such a weird spot and was in such desperate need for offense. Here's a spark plug. Here is a sign of life in terms of what that half-court offense in particular could actually be.
Yeah, I mean, Norm Powell had the best year of his life last year, so I think folks are like, man, this seems like nothing to give up for a guy who was on so many people's all-star shortlist, like just off of the cutting room floor, especially us, were blown away by the season that he had. That being said, the guy's about to be 31.
Sure.
He's not like some spring chicken, and he didn't have an amazing postseason either. And so you can kind of understand why the Clippers would be like, maybe this guy isn't so essential to what we need to do next year. But completely like Miami, who's just feels like they're always desperate for firepower, letting go of Duncan Robinson, bringing in some extra three-point firepower in Norm Powell. It all makes sense. And he has some on-ball juice that obviously Duncan Robinson never had until that one series he played against Boston. It's just pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't totally get where he fits in with the Heat. Assume he'll play a big role, but starting him next to Tyler Hero seems pretty complicated defensively. On the other end, he just is a very good player that you got for virtually nothing, and they need as much offense as you can get. Powell flirted with all-star bid last year. He was pretty good up until like around the end of the season. He kind of fell off. And then in the playoffs, you saw some of the defensive concerns kind of pop back in there, but tied for third in the league in catch and shoot 3-point efficiency. Fourth, tied in the league for fourth. Do you know who he's tied with, by the way?
Catch and shoot efficiency. Is this volume controlled?
I don't know, but I'm just going to tell you, it's Nikola Jokic. So
pretty good shooting season, as it turned out.
It's like Torian Prince, Luke Kennard, Isaiah Joe, Nikola Jokic, which is kind of unbelievable.
Insane.
So, like, for me, the Heat part of this is pretty straightforward. It's like they got a good player for nothing, and they can figure it out from there.
Yeah, I think the question is what you kind of illuminated there, Justin. Like, do you start him with Tyler Hero in the backcourt with presumably Andrew Wiggins on the wing? Or my preference would be bring Norm off the bench again, start Davion Mitchell, have a little bit more of that on-ball defense to balance out what Tyler Hero is giving you. I guess the question there is like, is Norm too good for that now? Is he too good and too proven a scorer to go back to a bench role, especially when it's one for a team like the Heat, who just isn't necessarily boasting the same kind of talent overall that the Clippers were? You know, I think it's one thing if you're like, okay, I'm taking a back seat to, you know, James Harden over here and Kawhi Leonard coming back over there. But when it's like, this is a Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo led team, I don't deserve to start on it. That is more of a negotiation than we would be led to believe.
And when your center is Bam, like sizing up everybody, like Wiggins at the 4 and maybe Norm at the 3, like that's not a good. Like, I think your offense would pop, honestly. I think you would have a nice little offensive rotation there. But defensively, geez, Louise, that would be so problematic. You know, the situation on the boards would be just a mess. And so, yeah, somebody's got to come off that bench. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was Davion, considering his contract. And even if you just consider Powell's sort of stature, he's a more proven player. He's got more cachet than Davion. So I can understand that happening as well.
Well, regardless of where he plays, like the Heat were 21st in offense last season.
Yeah.
Does this get them above average?
18?
Like,
No.
Not even that far, you don't think?
No.
It's tough.
I guess it depends on how much you could balance it defensively with the two big lineups that they're kind of defaulting to. Like, can Ware and Bam basically shut down the paint in a way that just makes them credible enough on that end that they could sacrifice some of the wing defense?
Yeah.
That's a path forward. Powell is bulkier and can play with a little bit more force when he wants to. How much he'll do that next year is kind of an open question. But I also think like he's in a contract year, which is a small wrinkle to this all. And so maybe he's looking to be the best version that they need him to be so he can get paid again.
One last job.
Yeah.
Love those
Exactly.
movies.
So 3 passes a game from Norm instead of 2, you think?
They're not coming from Tyler Hero. I'll tell you that. Well,
yeah, and
it's
Davion Mitchell too, because he did at the end of the season and in the playoffs. This guy was just on a torrid shooting pace. If this guy's jump shot is now a legitimate weapon, I think these questions about their offense become different. If what we saw at the end, because like he just played insanely good.
Yeah.
Best ball of his career by far. It's not even close. He never had any stretches before this where obviously he brings all of these tough guy, hard-nosed stuff on defense. Like that's his calling card. But his pull-up three-point game was crazy. Like teams had to stop going under screens with this guy. If that's real, then yeah, the offense just goes up.
Yeah, I think the crazy part is also that the Clippers kind of move past needing him so much, especially once Kawhi back middle of the season. At the same time, they do need some extra ball handling. We'll talk about that in a little bit later, but I almost feel like they got Collins, a player who, it's funny because like I want to believe in him and I look at the numbers, I'm like, wow, such a good player. But then I remember under what circumstances he got one of those numbers in Utah the past 2 seasons. So I don't know what to believe. He was playing only 40 games last year. Was he hurt? Was he not hurt? It's just impossible to tell. But Rob, I think like what he is the fact that he is like a bigger power forward, which they don't have in their stable of versatile combination of guys. I just feel like he's exactly what they need in that front court, either to play with Zoo, play like a small ball center. He seems like he fits what they need right now with the Clippers than what they need out of Norm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And he's been like a long rumored Clippers target for this reason or that. Just like, if you want a more, I guess, traditional four relative to the wings that they've been playing at that position, he's a decent option. He's been perpetually available, but often for reasons. And I think this was kind of a heartening season in terms of his play with the Jazz. Like, I thought it was some of his better pick and roll play. The shooting has obviously come on in Utah in a pretty big way. That's going to have to be a prominent part of what he brings to the Clippers. Like, in trading Norm, you're just trading one of your few high volume 3-point shooters on a team that doesn't have that much shooting on it. So Collins is going to have to take threes. Brook Lopez will obviously take threes. Amir Coffey, who's number 3 in terms of total threes taken last season for the Clippers, is a free agent who's kind of in the wind right now. We'll see if he comes back or not. That shooting is going to have to come from somewhere. So Collins is going to have to be a stretch option. He's going to have to be a roll option. I don't love that there's not an easy pathway for him to play minutes at the 5. I would love for that to be like a part-time element of what he's bringing to the table. But between Zoo and Lopez, I just don't see how that's going to happen.
What I do like is the Clippers kind of doubling down on their defensive identity that they established last year. So, as much as Jones Jr. did a yeoman's job playing the 4 all of last year, that's not a position he's naturally suited to. So getting a more natural fit there who, keeps that defensive standard where it was at last year and even can improve upon it when you consider this guy's rim protection ability and, he's still a mobile guy, athletic guy. I like that part of it. Now, again, certain times the offense just didn't look good at times, and like you're giving away, one of your key pieces on that end. But I do like the idea that they're like, no, we're going to be even better on defense next year. Just the old school curmudgeon in me loves that as a concept.
Yeah, I just love that the Clippers don't necessarily have to bind themselves and lock them into like one set lineup to play. It really seems to be more dependent on who the matchup is, who's playing well, whether or not Chris Dunn is going to hit shots or not. And so like there's just so much malleability. And part of it is the fact that Zoo is just so fucking enormous.
Yeah.
And then you have Brook Lopez in the back of him now, who's also pretty gigantic himself. That like soaks up so much of the like impetus in order to fill out the rest of the roster with size. And then Harden himself is basically a power forward playing at point guard. And so like you could do a lot of different things at the wing positions. Kawhi, basically a 1-4 guy at this point. And so like, do you want to play him in bigger lineups at the 4? You can, or you could just like not play Lopez in a single game and just play Collins as a small ball 5. There's just so much malleability is the buzzword we like to say, optionality, if I dare,
Jesus Christ,
to this
get off
team
the
now.
internet.
I know. There's just a lot there. And with a team with Kawhi and James Harden, I think to trudge through a regular season, what you need are options.
Yes. And they've built those, I think, gradually over time, especially over the course of last season. Like establishing Derrick Jones Jr. in the way it was described was so important. Bringing Chris Dunn along as an all-defense level contributor was a huge part of like the driving success of his minutes last season. But also trading for Bogey and now trading for John Collins and bringing back Nick Batum. Like these are all things that do make Norm feel a little bit more expendable. You always are going to need scoring from somewhere, but I think there are enough plausible options for where that scoring could come from now that you can get away with, okay, we're going to have our big 5s. We're going to have James running the point more or less full time. Everything else is flexible in between those kind of tent poles of what we're doing, including is Kawhi healthy this month or not? Is he available now or not? We're going to find out kind of how steady an influence he's going to be for the Clippers. Historically, the answer is not very, but now they have all of this other stuff to work with, including another flex scorer in John Collins, a guy who can pop off for 18 to 20 points and kind of give you some support in that way.
Well, what they don't have, probably the one thing they don't have right now is kind of a backup guard in order to soak up some of those Norm Powell minutes. They're very much in the Bradley Beal derby, if we're going to call it that, because apparently the Suns are thinking about waiving and stretching or buying out and then stretching our friend Brad Beal, who still has $110 million left on his deal. And so I'll say this about Brad Beal. Do I want Brad Beal with a no trade clause making $50 million a year?
No.
Hell no. But was like Bradley Beal on like a veterans minimum
Let's
who's just like
go.
looking to prove himself off the bench.
Something to prove.
Not bad.
A chip on his shoulder, a new environment, a team that like, he chooses and they choose him mutually. Like that changes the equation for sure. Definitely keeps his lady off of the internet, crying about all-star appearances. You know what I mean? Like, I love that. I love it. I love the idea of bringing in Bradley Beal off of a buyout. That's great. Like, it's not like he's, physically so deteriorated that he can't compete or that he doesn't have skills. Like, he can't make, some wide open shots, give you some secondary ball handling, like some level of getting to the basket. Like, this guy's he's a good basketball player. He's just vastly overpaid and insanely empowered by a no trades, which is like, hey man, your agent dope enough to negotiate that for you. God bless you. But my God, like you think about where he stands in the pecking order of NBA stardom, for him to be that paid and influential is crazy.
I mean, in basketball terms, whatever you liked about Norm Powell as a Clipper, Brad Beal can do most of those things. Whatever you like about Bogdan Bogdanovic as a Clipper, he can certainly do those things. I guess I worry about the human concern of what you're proposing there, Justin, of like, if you are Brad Beal and you do get to call your shot, are you going to call your shot to come off the bench for the Clippers? Like, is that the thing you want to do? And this is where I would say there's an offsetting human thing, which was one of the reasons I think Brad Beal reportedly has been reluctant to leave the Suns, is his family is pretty well established in Phoenix at this point, and you may not want to uproot the kids, take them out of school. That commute from Phoenix to LA is a little easier than it might be from other places. And we've seen other pros kind of make it where their family is in one place, they are in the other, and they kind of make it work. That's like a non-trivial part of this, I think, for Bradley Beal.
Bradley Beal's like allegiance to where his kids go to school is one of those things where it's like, am I so sports pilled that I think that this is ridiculous? Or is this actually how like a normal human should be making his decisions?
Look, for a kid to be having to move school to school, like for the kid, the rest of the family like miss me. The nanny, your wife, all of that.
Right.
Y'all got to deal with the fact that this guy makes 50-something million a year to play a sport. And if y'all got to move to one posh neighborhood to the next, like get over it. But like a kid while he's learning and all of that. But then again, that's what tutors are for. Get over it. You get a tutor, you get extra
They were
help.
just in DC like 2 years ago. I can understand if you were embedded in a certain community, like there's a certain like logic to that, but they literally just moved to Phoenix. Like how hard is it to just move again?
Bro,
This has been
money. Your kid is smart.
Yeah.
You get
He's
some
gonna make
tutors
friends.
on him. He gonna be straight. He gonna make it work. He gonna make new friends with them other rich kids. In that
Invite him
school
over
you
to the
put him
pool,
in, it's
yeah.
gonna be fine.
Yeah, this is not a matter of like them not being able to find the good schools in LA. This is, like you either are the kind of family who is willing to uproot your kids or not. And this has been the latest episode of three fatherless men debating the merits of parenthood.
Over it.
I'm just saying, look, regardless of what you may think of Brad Beal's priorities, these are reportedly among his priorities.
I see. Well, if there was another team on the board, do you see like an obvious fit for him? Because I don't see where he's going to like walk into a starting lineup tomorrow on a team that's willing to compete on a market that's attractive enough for his kids
market
to.
that's attractive. I was about to say, why can't he start over Case and Wallace?
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
he can't play defense would be one.
he might not need to play as much defense on that team.
Yeah. I don't see an obvious fit though for his particular brand of like okayness, like pretty good. Okay. I'm like a good scorer, but not like if you put me on a really good team, like I probably should be coming off the bench.
Yeah, I think realistically a bench role would be very good for him. I think he is going to be chasing something a little more than that, though. And that's where, like, Miami kind of coming off the board, like, that could have been an option for him potentially. Milwaukee, a team that he has already reportedly kind of spurned before via trade.
Milwaukee
we'll see.
Definitely needs him.
They do. Maybe that's what he needs is not necessarily bench or starter. It's do I feel needed enough in a way that I clearly was not in Phoenix.
That's the thing, too. It's like selling your lady on, we're going to, like, move to L.A. and, like, live in this sick neighborhood and like do all of these crazy dope rich people things like all the time. And it's like, no, we're gonna do that in Milwaukee. It's like,
But as you said, she's out here online advocating for her guy to make all-star teams. Maybe she does just want what's best for him, you know? Maybe she wants that opportunity for him.
Should we talk about the Jazz side of this?
Sure.
Which gets more and more depressing the more moves that they make this offseason. I think they'll show up a little bit later in one of our worst moves. But they basically just got rid of John Collins.
Yeah.
And we'll see what comes of it. They got a juicy 2027 second round pick out of it. So maybe they find the next Haywood Highsmith that route. It seems like they're just open up possibility, both in terms of cap space and this clearing the road for some of their young guys. And so I get it on one instance if Austin Ainge just wants to get rid of some of the veterans that have been looming about and maybe like suppressing the playing time for all these young guys that are slowly building up. There's a certain logic to that. At the same time, it seems like a pretty easy way to tank without actually saying that you're tanking by turning the keys over to all of these young players.
Well, they're clearly still in that market. Yeah. Look, I think by taking Ace Bailey, they're trying to see what's going on there, see if he can be kind of the dynamic creator on the wing that they would love for him to be long term. If that works out very quickly, awesome. He's 18 years old. It's probably not going to turn out that quickly in terms of like producing and creating and scoring at a playoff level. And so for where the Jazz are, I'm not so convinced that like Kyle Anderson is worse for this team than John Collins is as far as like plugging minutes and having a respectable forward. And frankly, given how young their backcourt is in particular, having a little more playmaking in terms of an adult in the room on the wing is probably a healthy thing for them. But this isn't a team that's competing for anything anytime soon.
Yeah, and also it's hard for me to knock this when, you know, what they were doing for the previous 2 years seemed to be some level of, no, we're rebuilding, but like, oh, we want all of these assets for these players, like whether it was Jordan Clarkson or any of the rest of the guys that they just held on to, you know, forever. So it's like hard for me to be mad when they're finally like dumping these guys. Yeah, there was, you know, two years ago, I'm like, man, I would have liked to see Jordan Clarkson on a real playoff team. Yeah. You know, whereas this year is just like it's just a fire sale of all of these guys in the backcourt, front court, you know, the wing, like, well, you name it. They're just letting these guys go.
Yeah, I assume Kyle Anderson just breaking the John Collins contract into smaller deals just allows you to just trade them a little bit more easily. Because as we're seeing, like actually making above like $15 million is apparently the worst possible thing in the world in the NBA at this point. Kevin Love, we'll see if he wants to stick around for one more year and just be a good vet. Sounds like based on his recent tweets, doesn't seem like that's part of it. He also has a wife with very specific like work needs and market preferences.
Oh, yeah? Do you want to tell us about those? I don't know all the details.
She seems to be a supermodel. So I don't know if she could apply that trade in Utah.
I don't know. Look, there's a lot of reality TV going on in Salt Lake right now. Like maybe you can backdoor your way into an appearance.
Rob, I'm so glad you mentioned this. Are you referring to the new Bravo TV show, King's Court?
I actually am not. I was referring to what I imagine is the Salt Lake-based Sex Lives of Mormon Wives.
That's right. I forgot about that. Well,
but
maybe swingers.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's not in Salt Lake. Maybe that's me assuming too much.
You set me up perfectly, though, because in the midst of all this happening, Andy Larson, who covers the team for the Salt Lake Tribune, tweeted out that Carlos Boozer, who's a Jazz scout, which I just learned today, is going to be part of a Bravo dating show called King's Court, in which Tyson Beckford and WWE's Titus O'Neil will seek to find love among 21 single women. So
locked in. Sign me up.
Who's the king? Who's the titular king in this scenario?
I don't know.
I think all three of them are kings.
So it's kings.
I think that's the case.
Plural apostrophe court.
No. There's no apostrophe. It's just King's Court.
Okay, we're gonna have to work with the copy editors on King's Court. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah, I think it is like they are kings and they're trying to find love.
Okay.
Yeah, Tyson Beckford being on that show is wild. That is something.
there's this quote in the press release, and I promise I'll move on after this. This is from Boozer. I've met so many women who will like recite my stats, like you averaged 21 points a game last year, but I want somebody who wants to get to know me.
Yo, chill out, bro. He's tired
Amazing.
of the groupies, yo. He's looking for real love, baby.
I don't know. You know, I think it's kind of beautiful when people express interest in your interests. You know, when they're willing to do the research, do the real work. I think there's something nice about that.
Having said that, I don't want to date anybody who knows a single thing about the Utah Jazz's cap sheet.
No. What about your stats, though?
They don't want to know those either.
What if you were to go on a date and they're like, I saw your ranking. You know, I was pulling up the Apple podcast rankings. I saw that the Ringer NBA show was climbing the charts.
That would be so
Which
uncomfortable.
But I have to be honest. When people start Googling me, they do find out facts about what I do for work, and it gets pretty interesting from there. Let's just say, like the psychopaths out there who've been saying shit, it's been clocked by some of the daters. So we got my mom.
Crazy.
We got my mom on last pod, and then all the creeps on YouTube just jumped right on that one, which I guess was endearing to a certain extent, but also worrisome in many other respects. But then, I had a couple dates be like, "Oh, so like this is what people think about you and your work." I'm like, and I just have to explain the whole thing.
You have to explain the context of online life.
Yes,
NBA coverage. It's not the most hinged place.
So
on the internet.
In addition to being nice to your mom in the comments, we also need to solicit some like online testimonials of Justin Verrier. You know,
Good grief.
You know, like how
reading the comments on a YouTube or a Reddit as a prospective Verrier dater,
it's a lot.
A lot.
Maybe it works for me.
Bro.
Maybe I'm the bad boy of the internet now. You know.
I do like
so
that
edgy.
for you.
He has just like spicy takes about the Clippers offseason. I want to see what this guy's about. All right. Well, speaking of spicy takes about the offseason, why don't we get into some of like an overview of what's happened thus far? Because after today's pod, I think we'll be on more of a summer schedule. We won't hearing for us as a trio for a little bit. I think we're going to be popping in here and there, but we'll see from here. Let's go through some of the best and worst moves of this offseason, because I'm such a positive guy, despite what they might say about me online. Let's talk about the best move of the offseason thus far. Rob, do you want to go first?
I think it's the Rockets turning Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and the number 10 pick into Kevin Durant. Like, whatever reservations you may have about KD, that's a guy they've been trying to trade for years, a 3-and-D wing, and a pick that they didn't have room to draft and play anyway. So seems like a huge win for the Rockets under the circumstances. We've talked about all the ways that KD fits exactly what they needed from a shot creation standpoint. I'm hard pressed to think that's not just the best move of the offseason so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think KD, in terms of a basketball fit, is a complete no-brainer, and that he comes in at least to start with buy-in on Ime Udoka as a coach, and it's just like, yo, I'm coming in here and I'm taking this seriously. And the reporting is that like the Ime and KD connection is real. I was actually talking to a couple people yesterday about Aaron Rodgers going to the Steelers, and the first thing he did was he did like a team meeting, went up in front of all of the guys and was like, don't judge me by what you heard about last season, blah, blah, blah. Called the New York Jets a joke of an organization. I was disgusted by that. But, like, it's sort of like you hear all of these, for lack of a better term, head KC kind of things about a guy, and then he comes into a new situation, having traveled, being well-traveled at this point, and being like, no, man, I'm taking this seriously. I believe in the structure and the management and the hierarchy of this organization, and I'm going to come in here and be a good soldier. So, yeah, it's just a great move for Houston.
It's what I also say to my potential datees. Don't judge me by what I did in my previous situation.
Be a great soldier. Sacrifice yourself, man.
That's right.
Genuine question, Justin. How did the dates feel about the Garden? Like, is that a point of interest? Is that some like are they engaged on that subject? How are they feeling about it?
If anything, I'm broadcasting it. I think I have on one of my bios.
You
is
have
that
it
I'm
on
an
Hinge
aspiring
that you're
Yeah.
into
gardener.
gardening.
If this
Yeah.
goes well, I'm going to eat one ear of corn and you're going to eat the other.
Oh no, we'll eat the same ear and just from
Oh,
different sides.
Lady in the Tramp style. Okay, there's levels to this stuff. You're just way ahead of me.
I think you guys would be surprised that there's a lot of other fellow gardeners up here. Like maybe if I was in LA, like it would be a little bit more
be
like, "Ooh,
different.
what's this guy? He's quirky and different." Like here, it's just like,
Just
all
a
right,
thing.
you go to the store, you
nature
garden.
and outdoorsy is like the brand of Portland, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
Yes. If anything, the fact that I don't spend every waking hour on like a gorge or something like that, it makes me the outlier here.
Get your gorges up. Come on.
Yep. So I also had a Rockets move, but I had the Fred VanVleet move, which was declining his the team option for him for $45 million, then signing him for 2 years, $50 million. If only because it set up the rest of the moves that they made. It just like the Rockets really laid out the blueprint of like getting the starter pack of veterans and then leveling up in such a seamless way without losing virtually any of their young guys. We could talk about Cam Whitmore a little bit later, but like they still have their young core. They have Kevin Durant. They have Fred VanVleet on a deal that's half as much as he was expected to being paid and was being paid in the previous 2 seasons, and just the runway to do a bunch more. And so just like the seamless transition, I thought was pretty impressive. And I mean, God, they might be the second to third best team in the West next year, but they also could be potentially even better than that.
Yeah, I think using their cap space in the way they did to sign Fred VanVleet, to sign Dylan Brooks, to sign Jock Landale, who hasn't worked out as well as the other two, but we should at least note him in this category as well. It's like you have to get above the salary floor if you're one of these teams that has incredibly low rookie scale contracts. And so they spent however much they needed to spend. They invested in these guys that would be tradable, or in Fred's case, re-signable with that team option and the flexibility that it provides. Like, you can do it the way that, you know, teams like the Nets are loaning out their cap space right now. Teams like the Jazz, I'm sure going forward, will loan out some of their cap space going forward as their books clean up. But you can also do it this way, where you can sign guys who are going to be useful to other teams, take the step forward that you need as your young players get up to speed. And then once it's time to transition and kind of, you know, pass the baton or take over the reins, like all of those mechanisms are kind of there, as long as those players are young enough to still be tradable in the way that like Dylan Brooks is useful to a team like the Suns.
And I got to give it up to Raphael Stone because temperamentally, like in terms of vibes, VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, these are like Ime Udoka kind of guys in terms of their approach to the game. So I thought that was a big boon too, because what is culture in sports, right? It's basically like a group of accepted behaviors. And they established pretty quickly that not giving a shit on defense and playing hard as hell will not be acceptable on the Houston Rockets. And I think bringing in those veteran guys, man, helped cement that, along with the coach whose ethos is all about that. So having a vision and actually being diligent and intentional, Justin, to use another internet word, being intentional with the veterans that they brought in, I thought was incredible too.
Is intentional an internet word?
Oh God, it's all over my
What's going on?
internet.
What's going on with intention on the internet right now?
Bro, just if you have any bougie blacks on your Instagram, that word just gonna come up all day, every single day.
Okay.
Yep.
Rob?
I got to diversify my following, apparently. It's not bougie enough.
There's some white collar blacks on your timeline. It's gonna come up daily, hourly.
It seems like from the same parlance of like being present.
Yeah,
you know,
all of that. It's all
you
that,
just want to be intentional with what you do.
All of that.
Yes. Honorable mentions. I have the Desmond Bain trade. This is kind of from the obvious pile.
That was my
really
best move. Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason why, I know people quibbled with the price of bringing Bain in. The reason why I like it is because it's a young team where management is like, we could quote unquote bide our time and be patient and wait for the perfect move. It's like, nah, man, Jason Tatum just went down. You know, Halliburton just went down. There's an opening for us in this conference where we can crash the party ahead of schedule. Why don't we go out and make ourselves more big time than we were, and basically tell our young guys like, bro, we throwing y'all in the deep end, man. Y'all don't get to wear the little, the floaties around your arm, around your freaking bicep that the little kids wear. No, you're done. You got to actually sink or swim. And with this move, they've announced that intent. And so I just love that for the Magic, because it so obviously addresses a need and is just a statement of like declaration. We're here to compete at the highest echelons of the Eastern Conference. So for me, I love that move.
Well, especially when like that waiting game too is offset by the fact that there is a very real ticking clock that is happening with all of these really good, really talented young players. And some of that is contractual, like they're going to hit their second deal, you're going to have to pay them. It gets harder to add better and better players as they do. But also, like, you just watch Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner over the course of that series against the Celtics, and you tell me that by games 4 and 5, they are not immensely frustrated with the reality of their circumstances and the lack of spacing. And like, those are guys who are ready to take a step forward in a lot of different ways. And that's not to say that they're not, limited in others or flawed in others or don't have weaknesses they need to rectify. Like, they're exciting young players who just need a little bit more space to work and a little bit more balance to that offense. And to go out and get that for them as much as anybody, I think is a really meaningful thing.
So I have a couple other deals, but they kind of fall in the under the radar category. So I'll save them till then. Anybody else on here?
I think the Hawks swooping in to get Nickeil Alexander-Walker exceeds the under the radar categorization, because to me, it's another one of these announcement moves. And it's one that, even though it is a depth move, perhaps it kind of transforms the base of the Hawks a little bit. It turns them into a team that, weirdly enough, like, the vision of the Hawks is clarified by opening up the possibilities, by making them malleable in the way we were talking about with the Clippers, by giving them so many different options to work with on the wing, and all this defense and all this ball handling. Like, all of a sudden we know who Atlanta is. Like, we know what that team is trying to be and probably how they're going to play. And I think a lot of that comes with just being able to pull off a move like this kind of out of nowhere.
Worst move on the board now. Do we need to put Dame's buyout and stretch in its own separate category?
Man, it's so bad. I just wanted to be slightly trolly and pick the Pelicans because I did defend the draft move.
Don't you dare. Wow, don't you dare.
In a vacuum, I still don't think the draft move is like the worst thing that's ever happened.
No.
It's just subsequently all of the reporting afterwards about how the new front office is carrying on their business, it casts a different light on that move. Like, yes, like, oh, you don't give away a pick, unprotected, blah, blah, blah. Your team's not even that good. We know all of that stuff. But like everything that's come behind it, where it's just like, the team just reached out to them and said, could we have an extra pick? And they were like, sure, take next year's. Like, conversation done.
Yeah.
And just some of the other conversations, I don't know. Like, you wonder who's actually leaking this stuff out of New Orleans at this point. I guess it's got to be holdover staff who are just like, yo, this is starting off pretty rocky. It's the general mood, coming out of the Pelicans that makes that move look different to me. Because when you bring in a brand new front office, you guys notice it's months of just rosy outlook and new beginnings and all.
You've got a lot of borrowed time.
Usually.
Yeah.
This has been the opposite of that. It's like the next day, shit just started falling apart. It's really scary. And if I'm a Pelicans fan, man, that ownership group, they've become some of the most toxic and horrible in the league. They're right up there with Vivek, with Ishbia, with some of the worst guys in the league. And so that would be, heartburn-inducing if I'm a Pelicans fan.
Taking shots at Ringer podcasters. That was the last straw.
That was crazy. I forgot about that. I retweeted
How dare
that,
they?
by the way.
Yeah, I think the Pelicans also in their own special category. Speaking of the Jazz, I have the Colin Sexton trade.
Yeah.
Which I'm still trying to figure out. He must just have been like causing a commotion in the locker room, or they just wanted to get off of him badly.
It's just too late. It's the whatchamacallit. It's the Masai thing. It's like they were trying to extract so much out of guys. Again, love Colin Sexton. Love John Collins. Love Jordan Clarkson. Bro, why were y'all trying to get an arm and a leg in deals for these guys in previous years? And I think it's gotten to the point where it's like, all right, we're done playing this game where the only trade we can make is the perfect one. That's the only explanation for this. It's like, all right, man, it's like little game of chicken that we were playing with the rest of the league in terms of, our useful veteran type of players, like known commodity type of players. All right, we can give up on this and just like lean into our destiny as a team that's so clearly rebuilding and has a focus and emphasis on younger talent.
Yeah. So they gave up a second round pick in that deal
to
give it to Sexton and then took back Nurk, who makes like slightly more and was unplayable as recently as like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And speaking of grousing, whatever noise Colin Sexton was making, I can assure you it will be less than Nurk. Yeah.
It's true. So I just don't get that. They had to buy out Clarkson. So I think Waz is right, Rob. I think the bottom just fell out on a lot of these vets that they were clutching onto, and they were just like, let's just clean the decks.
Yeah. Look, I understand that. Like, not just going with the sunk cost of we've held on to these guys for so long. We have to continue to do it to chase this particular trade return. Maybe you do just need to cut bait. It's just a bummer to see them have to give up a second to get rid of Colin Sexton, who is a good NBA player who is useful to teams, and I am sure could have returned at least a second for them if they had just been willing to give him up earlier and not waited this long. So it's a weird process that to me is very different than the John Collins scenario. Like, if you want to cut bait on John Collins and get something back, I can understand that. If you want to pay to give up Colin Sexton, you kind of lost me a little bit. Honestly, like, is this outcome better for the Jazz than just outright buying out Colin Sexton?
Good question.
To give up a second for the right of having Yusuf Nurkic on your team to potentially deal as salary later? Like, I just don't see it.
Here's another golden rule that I think we ultimately forget. This might be an agent thing.
Could be.
Where some agent is owed a favor for some reason. Whenever a deal just makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. Reggie Jackson on the Nuggets comes to mind. Like, it's usually some like relationship with the agent. Because this is like stupid.
Yeah. And to that point, the Hornets actually also brought back Trey Mann and brought in Spencer Dinwiddie. And so the backcourt is super crowded all of a sudden, but they're still like, sure, Colin Sexton for free. And he's already showing up at like the signing day for some of the rookies. So I don't know. I'm sure he'll have like a totally
building in Charlotte over there.
Well, it's
clearly everyone's just hanging out.
They're also.
I saw a meme of LaMelo Ball welcoming the rookie. Shoot, I'm blanking on the white. Oh, Knipple. Sorry, not
wrong white boy.
Wrong K.
It was almost Connect. Yeah.
And the meme was like, Melo Ball being your vet is crazy.
It is a little crazy.
I saw something where someone's like, "Oh, LaMelo Ball plays like has AirPods in, like he plays like he's listening to me." And I was like, God. That explained LaMelo Ball in a way that I've struggled for years.
Perfect. Yeah.
Of all my pickup basketball pet peeves, the guy with AirPods in, just my least favorite person on the planet.
That's a thing that people are doing in 2025?
It's a thing that people do. Yeah.
Jesus.
So you don't need to hear your teammates?
Apparently not. Well, let me tell you, if you've got the AirPods in, you're jacking whatever shot you want anyway. Like, communication is not exactly like your top priority in that situation.
Any other worst moves, Rob?
I do think it's telling that we're picking mostly trades. Like, the free agent signings, there hasn't been anything like super egregious, maybe like a slight overpay here or there. I also wanted to call out the Bulls trading Lonzo Ball for Isaac Okoro as one of the worst deals of this summer. Like, my least favorite kind of trade, in the way that you're dealing a player away who has real demonstrated effect on the way your team plays. Like, Lonzo changes the way that the Bulls play when he's healthy enough to play. And you're getting back a guy who does not do anything for your team at all. And I say that as someone, like, I think Isaac Okoro is mostly fine, but what problem is he solving for the Bulls? A team that already has some like random hustle wings, if that's the market you're trying to fill. Like,
a team that already employs Patrick Williams.
Well, I'm not sure
Like,
Patrick Williams does anything, and Isaac Okoro does something.
I'm like, bro, y'all have Patrick Williams as wing guy, vaguely supposed to be good at defense, allegedly
Yeah.
is hired to make open jump shots, and you traded for Ike Okoro too? That's amazing.
Again, to fill what role? Like, Ayo Dosunmu does a lot of the same stuff about as well. Like, you're investing in Julian Phillips and trying to figure out if he can be a player. Like, I'm more interested in, can Julian Phillips be a rotation player than I'm going to take on Isaac Okoro, where he is in his career at his current salary level. Like, I just really don't get what the Bulls are after there, other than they're freaked out by the injury concerns that come with Lonzo, which is a real thing. But if the solution is I'm going to fill it with a bunch of, like, league average or slightly below league average minutes from Ike Okoro, like, I just don't get the payoff.
That's the only, like, devil's advocate I would mention is maybe they know something about Lonzo that we don't. I mean, wasn't his knee just, like, reconstructed with, like,
that must be said for sure.
Yeah, but
The
maybe they
ligaments
built
of
him back
2.5
bigger and
years.
stronger than ever before.
yeah.
Build
I
back
mean,
better.
I guess, like, the Cavs need more of the high end, like, even if you play half a season, than the Bulls who just need consistent minutes. But yeah, Isaac Okoro is not who I would want to target in that circumstance. And once again, they just did a player for player swap, which I get it if it's Josh Giddey. I don't get it if it's Isaac Okoro, unfortunately.
Do you still get it if it's Josh Giddey?
Josh Giddey was good last year. What are we talking about?
He's fine.
He played above average considering the circumstances.
He improved and yet is still fundamentally the same player he was, and with all the same fundamental concerns. But, you know, I'm sure we'll get back to the Bulls at some point when we do our preseason power rankings, and they're somewhere in, like, the bottom half of the league.
I have a couple honorable mentions here. I have the Duncan Robinson sign-in trade with Detroit, if only because, like, it seemed like the Pistons were searching after the Beasley and Schroeder situations kind of bottomed out there, and they just needed a movement shooter, and so they reached for Robinson, who is bigger and can move and shoot, but obviously presents a lot of concerns there. Also, Clint Capella, I still am trying to wrap my head around that, despite all the good things that the Rockets did. Just signing him for 3 years to be your third string center. I guess you want to play Steven Adams with Şengün in the front court a little bit more often because they played so well together, especially in the playoffs. But is Capella going to play? I don't get that one as well.
Yeah,
and then the last one is Dennis Schroeder for $45 million, which apparently still isn't done because they're trying to rope it into a sign and trade.
Well, we should say Clint Capella was roped into the Kevin Durant deal, which became one of the biggest trades in NBA history, a 7-team trade that, as far as I can see, happened for not a lot of reason at all other than to make history. Like, I'm not sure that a lot of that was really that necessary, other than the Clint Capella part actually was kind of necessary. Like, there wasn't really another mechanism for the Rockets to get him at that number, which adds to the mystique and the intrigue of what you're talking about, Justin. Like, what is it that the Rockets want in Clint Capella as their third string center at that salary number that's so important to them? When, you know, you could add any kind of player to that roster and they could make sense. That's a roster that's flexible enough to incorporate all kinds of potential free agent talent. What is it about Clint Capella which makes my ears perk up? And I'm wondering, like, does that mean Alperen Şengün is not as nailed down to the Houston Rockets as we might think, given the fact that they're contending and he's a key part of that team? Like, are they trying to keep their options open with, you know, Jabari Smith can play the 4 or the 5. Steven Adams has obviously been very good for them. Like, they are flexible and movable. And I guess Clint Capella makes them slightly more so just by having that center depth.
Yeah, I guess not bad. Just I'm trying to figure out where he fits in the grand scheme of things. But they did just add veterans, Dorian Finney-Smith on top of that, just to an already good team. So I guess just take him if you can get him would be the overarching theme there.
Yeah.
Best under the radar move. Here I have a lot of options. Do you want me to power through some?
Please.
Go ahead.
Lightning round.
Why don't we start with Jay Huff to Indiana?
Hell yeah.
For a second round swap.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
That's one of
Me
our
too.
guys.
Why overpay Miles Turner when you can get 80%
Okay.
of Jay Huff at home?
Let's not be disrespectful. 80% nuts.
70%?
No. I mean, absolutely not.
Now, has Jay Huff played an entire season where you're like, wow, Jay Huff starting center for a very good team?
No, but
Maybe
in
not,
his
but
moments, he looks like somebody who's capable of starters minutes.
Sure.
Just fits what they're going for there. Like,
Yes.
like shoots threes, can
I
protect the rim,
definitely-
bouncy athlete on the other end. Yeah, go ahead.
When I saw that on the ESPN ticker, my eyebrow went, interesting. I definitely had a physical reaction to seeing that.
It does have
No.
a nice ring to it.
The Grizzlies turning around and immediately signing Jock Landale, I was like, maybe that's about the caliber we should be expecting.
Yeah.
But, if he's only a plug and play guy until they figure out their center for the future, that's a guy that fits the system and is a good player in his own right. So I really like that move.
Yeah, and look, Jock Landale has had good seasons as a backup before. So, like, that's what Jay Huff is realistically, is a backup caliber center. And if you're going to put him into sort of a platoon to hold down the spot until you get the eventual Miles Turner replacement, I think that's a perfectly good use of his skill set. And somebody who I think does the Thomas Bryant things better than Thomas Bryant does. And so, you're going to have like some options there that are more traditional fives. You're going to have some options there that are more just like pure energy rebounding types. Like, let's get somebody with a little bit of stretch who also has some of that physicality. Like, I think Jay Huff is a good element in that mix, if not an answer in and of himself.
Yeah. Another one I have down here is the Jonesboro combination. And I like the Trey Jones contract, which was 3 years, $24 million with the team option on it at first. But then I saw that Tyus Jones, his brother, who is better, albeit a little bit older, went for 1 year, $7 million. And I'm wondering, why didn't the Bulls or anybody else just do that? But overall, I like both players, and I think they're both helpful rotation guys, and they could be on any team at this point. Tyus, obviously better, and on a team that needs him to organize things in the Magic. But I like both deals.
I like, why didn't the Bulls just do that as a recurring segment for us?
Why didn't the Bulls just do that? Like, ask for something in a deal where they're giving up the better player.
Hypothetically.
Why didn't they just do that?
Multiple times. Who's
They
to
don't
say?
fret with the small stuff. They're focused on the big picture.
Why did
They are a
they
big
just
picture
do
team. You're right.
That? One of my under the radar things was Tim Hardaway Jr. for the Vetsmen, because I think at times in his career in New York and Dallas, I think he was kind of overstretched in his responsibilities. And, it's easy to get tired of Tim Hardaway Jr. when he's actually being relied upon.
Yeah.
Whereas in Denver, it's going to be very context specific. And I think he is perfectly suited to do the things that they're going to ask him to do. And I really like that move for them because, again, Tim Hardaway Jr. is the kind of guy that can make 7 threes in a game, but he's also the kind of guy that go 2 for 15. And when he's doing first of all, never take 15 shots on the Denver Nuggets, ever. In your capacity there. Although I could see it happening in garbage time with this kind of dude. But on Denver, he's not going to be some guy they're designing plays, or sometimes he'll get I can do stuff off the dribble, that kind of he's not gonna do any of that. It's gonna be movement stuff. It's gonna be wide open spot up. It's gonna be every now and again getting out on a break, even because Denver is a pretty slow team. I just love that he's beautifully suited to what they're gonna ask him to do next year.
He just kind of makes sense for them as another roll of the dice as far as rotation guys go. He is maybe slightly more reliable and proven than a Julian Strawther would be. Definitely. And maybe the dice are kind of loaded in different ways, where this guy kind of makes more sense in this matchup and that guy makes sense in that matchup. It's I don't think any of Denver's, 8 through 15 players are rock solid. But all you need is 1 or 2 of them to be okay on a given night. And Tim Hardaway is going to be in that mix of guys who is a little bit feast or famine as a shooter, is a little bit feast or famine as a player. But when he feasts, man, he really fucking feasts.
That's what I also liked about Denver's offseason. Not only did they get just a crew of old guys in there to finally provide some stability, they also didn't sacrifice the depth of recent draft picks in order to do so. And now, I don't know if Julian Strawther is going to turn into this miracle movement shooter that everyone's been projecting for 3 years at this point, but they also didn't give up that hope. And it just makes me wonder, what took so long? Why couldn't you have been doing this for the past 2 seasons? So they're literally having their cake and eating it too on this roster. And
Well,
part of that includes strong arming Jonas Valanciunas to be a part of the team despite not wanting to be there.
that's a 30 for 30. I think the reason
more on that?
why Justin is like the freaking management, the front office was dysfunctional. And if they brought veterans in, the young guys would be automatically glued to the freaking bench. Like that was what was going to happen. And so the freaking convoluted distortion of, Calvin Booth becomes don't have any veterans. And so the young guys get forced into minutes. It's like now that there's some level of synergy, continuity, or mutual respect, just like, no, like these guys are going to get a fair shot, these young guys. And these veterans, like I'm happy to have them as a backstop. Like it allows for this. But like when your coach and your GM legitimately hate each other, legitimately can't speak to like they don't speak to each other, you get the dysfunction that you had in Denver the last 2 years.
And now perfect harmony, other than strong arming veterans to come play for your team, everything is going according to plan. I do want to say, as we're talking the two timelines of the Denver Nuggets, if you're out there trying to unload your Jalen Pickett stock, I'm looking to buy. I'm looking to invest a little bit more. I'm anticipating a December 1st podcast in which JV comes in with an opening segment, like Jalen Pickett's got a little something. He's got a little juice. He's coming off a week where he averaged like 12 points a game, and we're starting to see the vision. I kind of think this is going to be a Jalen Pickett year.
I mean, the backup point guard role is right there for somebody to take it.
Some Bruce Brown, some Pickett, guard combo kind of thing.
So I hope he's working on something in the offseason.
By December 1st, I'm hoping to start my DIY podcasting company. So maybe you and Waz will be talking about that, but I'll be giving tips on growing heirloom tomatoes.
We all have our callings.
Yeah. Any other under the radar moves? Rob, did you give one yet?
Oh, I have so many. I think the chain reaction of the Knicks getting Gershon Yabusele for the taxpayer mid-level, that's a great move.
Excellent.
The Sixers backfilling by getting Trendon Watford to play the Yabu role next season, also very exciting. So I'm excited by that whole sequence of events. Our guy AJ Mitchell re-signed very early with the Thunder for 3 years, $9 million. That guy is worth more than 3 years, $9 million. I know he's not ready for second quarter minutes in the NBA Finals just yet, but I would be thrilled about that kind of arrangement if I was a team like the Thunder.
He played in the finals and now is playing in Summer League.
Yeah.
Has any other player gone from playing finals minutes to Summer League minutes? I've never seen that before.
That's a great trivia question. I think we need to get to the bottom of it if it's ever happened before, because AJ is a shining example of something, but certainly of a talented prospect that was just re-signed at a bargain rate.
I guess as a second round pick, somebody dangles $9 million guaranteed in front of you, you got to take it. But
totally for the champs.
Yeah. He won't be seeing another contract till he's 26. It's kind of crazy.
That is kind of crazy. Another one of our guys, Cam Whitmore, who the Wizards picked up for 2 second-round picks. Good bit of business for the Wizards in what's been, honestly, like a pretty good offseason for Washington overall. Not the glitziest thing, but a lot of good deals being done.
If you'll forgive me some asset porn here, but I do think collecting a lot of those stray picks allows a team like the Wizards to win the derby for some of these second draft guys that I think are going to be coming off of good teams more and more these days, because you see all these good teams stacking multiple picks. We'll see with the Rockets, who Reed Shepherd, I hope plays, but like if he doesn't, then that's another opportunity. Like the Thunder, another team that's just shedding the skin of its bench, which is just like 3 first-round picks virtually every other year at this point. I think there are going to be opportunities, is ultimately what I'm saying, for second draft guys for other teams, and the Wizards, by just having enough stuff left over to just give them 2 seconds, which isn't much, but it's something that they just have in the coffers to get Cam Whitmore and try for themselves to like get a guy who's already shown himself to be an NBA player and just give him more opportunities. I think that's important. So as you're going through like the trade transaction wires, you're like, oh, this got traded for 2 second-round picks 13 years from now. It's like, well, I guess down the road, every little thing tends to matter. And I think this is one of the examples of that.
And I think you've already kind of see it pay off for Washington a little bit with some of their other moves. Like, JV, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I have detected some AJ Johnson optimism from you based on his late season Wizards tenure.
I think he might be 100 pounds soaking wet. And so I'm like just fascinated by him.
Sure.
He looks like just like a kid at the mall at this point. He's probably like 19. But you're right. He has some juice to him. And after grinding so much Wizards tape over the last 2 months of the season, I could tell you with some degree of certainty that there's something there. Any other ones? I have a couple more here. Rob got the Yabu deal, which I got to say, like, pretty good. You leveled up and added the Trendon Watford one on top of that, which I have to give you credit for.
Thank you.
Gershon Yabusele's replacement.
Both good players. I don't know what to tell you. The Knicks got better. The Sixers, considering the guy that they lost and were going to lose, I thought did pretty well.
Knicks have a bench now, which is kind of scary. We'll see if Jordan Clarkson still has enough in the tank in order to fill up those backup guard minutes.
Can he be better than Campaign?
Exactly. 100%. Yes. Or Landry Shamet. So they have like 2 to 3 guys coming off that bench now, or 4 if it's Robinson, it's Yabu, it's our guy Deuce, and now Jordan Clarkson. And so like Knicks plus the bench.
Speaking of which, I saw DeLon Wright at my guy Black Trey's wedding on Saturday. Congrats to my guy Trey on his nuptials. Didn't ask him about his free agency. I thought it would be a sore topic, so stayed out of that one.
So you're reporting that you were derelict in your duty.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Just name dropping for the fuck of it.
Okay.
Great. And then I had Luke Cornett, 4 years, $41 million.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
I think the Luke Cornett deal is going to be pretty fun for the Spurs.
Hell yeah.
I think it's going to be a pretty fun time. I'm particularly eager to see him and Wemby play together.
Be fun to watch next year. They are.
Absolutely.
Just teach Wemby the Cornett contest and see what happens.
Can you imagine the power? The sheer possibility. Although as the Spurs go, like Chris Paul, one of the free agents who's just kind of dangling out there and has alluded to the fact recently that this is going to be his last NBA season. I want to see where the last CP dance goes. Yeah. Like I want to see what he signs up for. I think it's going to be a team, again, that's competing for a little bit more than San Antonio is. The Phoenix Whispers have been out there. Clearly, that's a team that needs some ball handling and playmaking.
For more than San Antonio is?
Well, that was what I was going to say. I don't know that they're really in the mix for more than the Spurs, but maybe it's just a comfortable enough spot that CP would go back there. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's this is the last question on the docket. Like, what are the big questions still left on the board here? And I do think a lot of it comes down to the olds, which is Chris Paul now in his swan song. I wonder how that mixes with a team that has like title aspirations. Is his like just getting gifts from every team, Kobe style, going to like all of a sudden be a distraction? Then Al Horford, Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, as we mentioned, like the all-star class of like 2009 is still out there looking for work and can help some teams. So it's basically what we're watching right now.
Oh, but another thing for me, and this is kind of more big picture, is like, what is the future of free agency, particularly with all these teams that have draft capital out the door? Because I think, when I looked at it like in 2019, I remember the hand wringing about the AD move that the Lakers made. And I'm like, well, the Lakers just got AD to force his way to LA. Like, clearly, they can just make things happen in ways that aren't traditional, right? But if you don't got the picks and nobody becomes a free agent, like, how do you get these guys in the door? Because traditionally, it'd be like, look, y'all can keep your little picks or whatever. I go through a year and a half of lean years, open up a bunch of cap space, time it to the guy or two that I really love, and boom, look at me, I'm back, right? But now, if dudes aren't moving into empty cap space, and maybe that'll change. It's the NBA.
Sure.
Like, maybe the way that roster construction is going to open up the idea that, say, a Luka Doncic or somebody's like, you know what? I'm actually going to reach free agency next time and not just hop on an extension as soon as I can, especially the guys at the top tier. I just wonder, if we ever get back to major actual free agency movement in terms of signings are concerned?
It feels more important than ever that you draft well, that you draft players that could actually be enticing via trade. And this is where, like, I'm still with you, Waz, that the Pelicans deal was maybe piled on a little too much as far as being like one of the worst deals of all time. I don't think it's that, but I do think it is maybe a uniquely damaging form of self-sabotage relative to this market right now. Like, you need those kinds of picks to hit, and you need to have them for them to hit in the first place. Like, if the only way you can get your next franchise player is either by drafting them or trading players you drafted for them, then what are you doing sending picks out the door unless you are just damn sure that Derek Queen is that guy?
Yeah, I think a lot of the buying out we're seeing this offseason of like totally helpful players just making too much money is an indication that perhaps we're moving past the point where guys are getting their money and then forcing their way to somewhere else, or just getting their money and figuring it out later, which was largely driven by the superstars that trickled down to the next wave of guys. And so I almost wonder if this is the recalibration happening in real time. And so we'll see the next permutations of that happening. I do also wonder if that's the case, are teams going to be now loath to do that? And we actually will cycle back into an era where free agency and cap space start to matter, because as we've seen with literally everything is just a rejection of what just came before it.
Right.
Like everything in culture, everything in life. And I do think the NBA tends to work in that way. And so I almost wonder, teams that are setting themselves up with cap space, all of a sudden teams won't pay a certain, like the advantage teams were supposed to have was the Supermax. And that is just clogging up books to the point where the Celtics can't withstand a contender for more than 2 years, because then they just have to get rid of everybody to get under the second apron. And so I think there will be more player movement down the road, maybe 2 to 3 years from now, but we just have to get through the adjustment period right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the other victims of that adjustment period, and one of the other big questions right now as we kind of wrap up the rest of the offseason and free agency, is what happens with these restricted free agents who are just sitting there on the market without a lot of options, like Jonathan Kuminga, Josh Giddey, Quentin Grimes, all still out there. Cam Thomas, Isaiah Jackson just kind of like waiting around trying to figure out if they can get something done.
Bro, they're going to have to take low ball extension offers.
I mean, I think they have a couple of options. One, clearly, their agents can work the phone.
Or be a Hard Rock, Rob, and be like, fuck you. I'll play on a qualifying offer. Fuck you guys. I'm out in the next offseason.
That is the nuclear option that I think is encouraged by this cap environment.
This behavior. Yeah.
Yes. Because there is not a lot of just like space out there for them to get absorbed into. It's either like you take somebody's mid-level, which starts at about $14 million. I don't think that's what most of these guys are trying to land for their next deals.
That would be nice for you, Quentin Grimes.
Not a bad deal for Quentin Grimes, potentially, but he also had a really nice situation with the Sixers, and I think could fold into a different sort of nice situation with the Sixers if he wants to resign there. It's just like, are they being generous enough with their offer? Are the Bulls upping? Well, I don't want the Bulls to up their offer too much, particularly, or the Warriors with Jonathan Kuminga, for example. Like it's complicated because
he's out there what he's been offered.
No, I don't think so. He
hasn't been offered.
No, I would guess that they've all been offered, and they have thought, you know what, I can do better. Whether it's in a sign and trade, whether it's in some mysterious cap space that they think is going to open up, it's just there's not a lot of options out there for those guys.
Restricted free agency has always been a joke. There was a time where there was enough cap space floating around that teams were willing to tie up their books for a couple of days, and they even got rid of that rule. And now it's a little bit easier to offer. It's just like nobody's going to go through the rigmarole of giving a guy an offer just for their team to ultimately match it. I think the one wild card might just be that the Jazz opened up enough cap space to get a little bit interesting with some of these guys. And they do tend to be opportunists with those sorts of things where it's like, oh, here's this guy who's on a little bit overpaid. We'll just take him in. But at the same time, I would be just as likely seeing them just like take contracts and just like dump the money and get more picks in there. So I don't think anything's going to happen. And I think these guys are probably going to sign below market deals is ultimately how this plays out.
I think you're probably right. I think you're also right about restricted free agency in general being a bit of a dud mechanism, at least as far as the players themselves are concerned. That said, I do love a ticking clock. I do love you have 3 days to match this offer to DeAndre
Every second
Ayton.
counts.
This is what I'm saying. If we're going to have all these like fake tension mechanisms going on in all of our forms of entertainment, at least give me this one back in a meaningful way.
All right. Why don't we wrap it there? Thank you to Ben Cruz. Thank you to Kyle Williams. We'll be back at some point in the future, down the road. We'll see. But we will talk to you then. Have a good summer. Enjoy all of those Bronny James highlights.